Former Cafe Long Island. We are your hosts, Stefan Acevedo,
Aziza White,
Keith B. Robinson,
Marcia McNair,
Tasha Ewart, and we are here in conjunction with the African American Museum and Center of Education and Applied Arts, presenting the Harlem Book Fair on Long Island.
What is Cafe Long Island?
Cafe Long Island deals with national, global issues that affect the diverse communities and neighborhoods here in Long Island.
And we want to hear from you guys. So if you guys have any event or ideas or any locations you guys want us to come to and film or cover, you can get us our email. It's cafelongisland@gmail.com.
You are tuned in to Channel 20, Cablevision, so keep on tuning in.
As educators, what do you think about the changing definition of diversity in the schools, where once diversity was African American and let's say Puerto Rican, now it's African, it's South American, Central American, and how does that sort of play into your vision of supporting your communities, the initial intention of uplifting our children?
Basically, this diversity that you're talking about really is a paradigm shift that the country is facing in every state, every community. And basically, we have to teach differently. We have to be inclusive. We have to be concerned about this diversity, whether it's African American, African from West Africa, children from Peru. We have to really have a program that addresses everyone's needs. So, it's changing, but the skills, the strategies that we put forth have to be able to utilize in a setting that meets the needs of all different diversities.
I agree. And to actually combine something you said earlier, Joy, and what you just said, it's really important that, we build a child's sense of self. Once a child has a really confident sense of self, they're open to receive information from other sources. Our children are going to grow up in a global community, so it is important that they understand other traditions, other cultures, languages. So we as the educators, the parents, the grandparents, the teachers, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that they're exposed to the rich cultures that have come into our communities. So it's cyclical. As you said, it's just a changing dichotomy of our community. So, and it should be something that is welcomed and embraced and celebrated. So I look forward to all the different fabrics that we use to piece together this quilt that we call our community.
Mm-hmm. And there's a strong array of literature that's already available from every walk of life. If you're working with young people, especially, you go to the folk tales and you start looking at some of the characters and some of the stories that are often told within those family dynamics and what's often told in those cultures. And that's the beginning of not just your child learning about Anansi the spider, but my child also learning about El Coqui, the frog, and the Puerto Rican folktales as well. And that's across the board. So there's always material, there's always an approach, and there's always a dynamic by which you can introduce and invite young people into learning about other people's, the richness of other cultures as well.
And its attitude, it's welcoming. It's very, very important to be welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Kids are also open to language. Even if I'm telling a story and it has some phrases that are in other languages, they get excited that they're walking away with another way to say hello, another way to say please or thank you, and it's not intrinsically their language, but it's the beginning of a conversation or a language that they're starting to connect to someone else's.
And what that does also is it pulls in that one child that might feel like an outlier. You might be the only child who speaks that language in your school, but here is a book that has a word that you recognize. Mm-hmm. So if you're an English language learner in a school, and this is a moment for you to be the one who has the right answer and to feel confident and to feel valued in this community. So that is really important.
And professional learning is very important. It's really important for the teachers to be prepared for these differences.
Definitely.
It's not the children, it's the instruction. It's understanding that, the dynamics are changing in our country. So teachers have to be welcoming to all of these different languages and cultures and etc.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add, you have to speak to people who represent those cultures and languages.
Right.
You cannot operate outside of that, because oftentimes what we're doing in honesty and earnestness, we think what we're doing is fair and we think it's just, and we've just insulted someone.
Yeah.
We've said a comment or we've said a phrase that we don't realize is unpopular with a group of people. So sometimes it's good to put it past someone not only speaks the language, but they are of that culture as well. Find and seek them out, find them, so that you are being authentic and you are being, and young people can tell. And if they see you're struggling, they help you through it as well.
Yes, they will.
So.
Illiteracy is a vicious cycle. The poor parent who can't read very well then pretty much passes on their poor reading skills to the next generation, and so on down the line. Do you have any advice for parents who are poor readers but they want to help their children to be better readers, not to go through the same thing that they went through? And even advice for adults who have problems with literacy.
There's a quick story I'd like to share, and it's a very interesting story because this person went on to become one of the most profound doctors in the country. And the story is about a young boy who at 14 was having such a struggle in school, and he was a terrible reader. He was a struggling D student among his classmates, and one day he became very upset with a friend who, turned up some music on a radio, and he stabbed at his friend. And instead of actually making contact to his body, he stabbed his belt. So he locked himself in a room. He was devastated to know that he was so angry. He didn't realize he had all that venom going on, anger. And he reminded me of many young black males who have all of this repressed anger, and it just comes out. Well, that young man, he turned out to be Dr. Ben Carson. That was the very beginning of his mother beginning to make him and his brother do book reports. And each week she would check these book reports. They had no idea that years later their mother only had a sixth grade. A third grade. Thank you. I'm stand corrected. She had a third grade education. But she knew she wanted bigger for her children, and it was important to her. And I think with the incident that happened with Ben as a young teenager, that became the beginning of his great life, because he was also understanding that he was frustrated and couldn't really put a finger on it. So his mother also provided an instruction on structure. But she was adamant. She checked every week on these book reports that he and his brother had to do, and they just got stronger and better, and they had no idea that their mother was limited.
That language acquisition, I'm so sorry. That language acquisition, or that lack of vocabulary to articulate your emotions, is the genesis of a lot of lashing out, shall we say, violently, physically in the community. That's why literacy is so important. You have schools and neighborhoods full of children and adults who just don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the words to express what they're feeling. And having that repression, just layer upon layer, it comes out in some way. Fortunately, with the advent of hip hop and rap, sometimes you have a created language that is used to express those feelings. But it's really important that the parents start to speak with students and their children, be it a student, your own child, and why do you feel this way? Can you put a word, to that feeling, and help them to develop the vocabulary and the skills to articulate those differences. So that was a very interesting anecdote that you shared.
I want to just go back to Marcia's original question about parents, and we have to help parents start with themselves from where they're at. And a very interesting story is the one that was told on Like It Is by Malcolm X's brother. He said that his mother had an Anglican background, educational background, very limited. She was raised in Guyana, and he said that what she did was every day they would come home and they would have to read a newspaper article that came from the Caribbean. It didn't mean that she could read this article, but she knew if they couldn't read. And all she had was a dictionary. And his brother pointed out that that's how Malcolm became the brilliant, educator and inspirator and writer and reader that he was. So I think that we have to understand that we have all we need. It's just the way in which we use them. So now, in terms of parents not being able to read, they have a library. It's how welcoming we are. They have schools in the community. How do we receive them? So that's really important. It's what we do when, we find out. Do we make them feel good about themselves in spite? It doesn't mean they're not intelligent. It means that they may have not had the opportunity. Right. And we have to recognize that. So, in conclusion, how can listeners get in touch with you all? Joy, let me start with you. Do you have an email address or website, way of contacting you at the library?
Well, I'm at the Roosevelt Public Library. I have an email address that I can be reached, and that is jrankin, RANKIN, RooseveltLibrary.org. jrankin@RooseveltLibrary.org.
All right, great. Can you give us the library's address also?
Sure. We're at 27 West Fulton Avenue, Roosevelt, Long Island, New York.
Thank you. And Dr. Kronin, and I see you have your book there, Creating Smart Schools. How can we get a copy of your book?
Oh, you can get a copy by visiting my website. That's www.creatingsmartschools.com. You could also reach me at my email address, which is jkronin@verizon.net.
Great. And Principal Cotton-Rodney, how can we get in touch with you?
Well, I'm available by email at gretchen.rodney@yahoo.com. And a couple of things I would like to share before we leave is there are some websites that are rich with activities that parents can use when they're engaging their young people. PBS Kids has great stuff.org. PBSkids.org has great links to interactive activities that is updated weekly, so it won't get stale, because those little attention spans, sometimes they get a little bored quickly. Nickelodeon Kids, little tongue twister for me. .org has also has a literacy strand there, so you can have some interactive media. At PBS Kids, their information is downloadable to an iPod. So if you're going on a vacation, or you're going to be a while somewhere, you want to keep your young one entertained, that's a way that you can engage them and teach them simultaneously.
I'd like to add also, wherever you are, just your public library. Go to that web link, because oftentimes we share databases across the country, and you have links to them to use them using your card, just putting in your number, and you have free access to them. One particular that I want to mention here is Tumble Books, and you probably are very aware of Tumble Books. It's a great early read for young people, and Brain Pop is also another one. And oftentimes your public library will have free access. So please check your local library to see what is on your youth page or your children's page, because oftentimes they're also linked into the school system.
Yes, they are.
So
I also would like to add that I have a website, www.ejcroninconsultants.com, and we're available to help any educator with any particular problem that they might have in terms of influencing young people, and also helping administrators.
Awesome.
great.
Well, thank you all so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Marcia.
This is our first
you,
episode
Marcia.
of Cafe Long Island, so you will be going down in history, but for more than that reason alone, because you all certainly you're doing so much in this field. It's an important field, and we're hoping that many of the people who see your work and get some of these resources will benefit from it. So thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today.
And thank you for your commitment and passion as well.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So this has been Marcia McNair for Cafe Long Island. I'm at the Harlem Book Fair on Long Island at the African American Museum and Center of Education and Applied Arts. And we've just finished speaking to the panelists about children's literacy. And we hope you'll join us again next week for our next episode.
Hi, I'm Tasha Ewart. I'm with Cafe Long Island. I'm here to talk with Lauren Raysor about her book, Living the Wealthy Life. I wanted to ask you first, what led you to write this book?
Well, the most important reason for writing this book is because of one of my clients named Makita. Makita was the victim of a shooting by a rapper by the name of Remy Ma. And as a result of that, as I studied the case for 1 year and was inside of the courtroom during the trial, I thought that there was a disconnect between my generation and the generation of Remy Smith or Remy Ma. And I decided to write a book about principles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are the principles about, essentially?
Well, what I decided to do was talk about success and how do you sustain success over time. Mm-hmm. Not the one-shot wonder success, but sustain it over your lifetime. And the principles, they came from a culmination of very successful people. And it seems like those who have been successful over time, there is a thread that seems to run through all of those individuals. All I did was take some of those principles and take some of those characteristics and I put them in the book.
Okay. And so what are some of the points in the book that you would like to share or you think that are extremely memorable? And
the one that I love the best is be excited about your life, joyful about your life, and don't let anyone steal your joy. I talk to a lot of young people and they are hearing what the adults are saying. They're not saying it. They're hearing us talk about tough economic times, layoffs is the highest amount of unemployment, and even though they may not be talking to you about it, they feel it. They think their future is not going to be bright. So I have to get back in there and say, be excited about your life, because what you have is some of the things you have today are some of the things we didn't have. So this is, you're in a good time, even though it's tough economic times, you can use the computer, the digital age. There's so much that you can do to be successful. So I want the principle that I love the best is be excited about your life.
I wanted to know, so where can people get this great book?
Well, there are 3 ways to get it. Barnes and Nobles, you can go there and ask and order it. You can also go online, Amazon.com, and also you can go to my website, livingthewealthylife.com, livingthewealthylife.com, and you can see it there, or you can peruse through there, and that's how you're able to get it.
Okay, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me and being a great role model for people in the community, and I hope you have a really good day.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
Hi, I'm Stefan Acevedo, your co-host for Cafe Long Island, and I'm here at the African American Museum and Center of Education and Applied Art. I'm here with Muriel Harris Weinstein, the author of Play Louie's Play. And Muriel, I just want to ask you a few questions. What led you to write this book? I see from the title it might have something to do with Louis Armstrong.
Yes, it does. I had written when Louis Armstrong taught me Scat. And while it was not about Louis, it used Scat, which Louis made popular. And because I wrote it in a poetic scat, I decided to write an afterword on Louis and his life for the reader. And when I researched, I fell in love with Louis. He was incredible. I think he was really heroic. And he had such an interesting life, but a tough life. Kids today, I felt, should know what poverty is. They should know how he struggled and yet succeeded, and always with a smile on his face.
I see you have another book in your hand. It looks like another Louis Armstrong inspired book. When Louis Armstrong Taught Me Scat.
Yes. Louis Armstrong did inspire it. I was teaching. I taught for 25 years in East Meadow. And one year, Bank Street trained us. And they suggested that the kids chew gum to relax. And I saw the fun they were having with the gum. And so I remembered this. And this is a tribute about the joys and fun of chewing bubble gum. And Louis Armstrong writes a scat here, and it goes, oobly coo, oobly cat, bubble me a bubble and bubble it fat, oobly coo, oobly bat, blow me a bubble and bubble gum scat. And it continues.
Wow, that's nice. I'm gonna have to practice that one at home though by myself before I go out and start performing. So Muriel, if people wanted to read these books, which I think all children should be exposed to because they sound so lovely,
Right.
where would they get a hold of some
Well,
of
a lot of the libraries on Long Island do have them, and those that don't, I'm going to get on their tail. And the bookstores have them too. If they don't have them, they can call up, because it's Bloomsbury Press and Chronicle Books, both very well-known, reliable publishers, and they can get it through them. If they want my email, I'll be very glad to give it to you. M as in Mary, IRYO M again at uptonline.net.
Well, thank you for your time, Muriel.
Well, thank you.
And this is Stefan Acevedo from Cafe Long Island.